There we go. Yep. Yeah. So how's everybody doing? Should we, do you have a joy to share?
I survived my first week.
All right.
It went really
to be
well.
celebrated.
Our classes are almost all full, which is really fun. And I had a baby class today. I had 8 and I'll have 9 if they all come. And that is the biggest. And this is not my newborn class that rotates. I had 15 this week. But this is like my 3 to 12 month class. And I had 8 babies. It was loud. And they're all between 3 and 5 months, which is really unusual. But anyway, it feels like pre-COVID, like for the first time in a long time. It
Yeah.
feels like we have pre-COVID numbers, no masks. It just feels really good. Like the like riding a bike, you know what I mean? It just feels good and normal, and I don't have to be hyper vigilant about anything. So I feel great.
I was gonna say the same thing, Ellen, except I don't feel like I've had a normal year. So it's not so much that it feels normal as it feels like this is probably what it's supposed to be like.
Welcome to your first normal year. You're gonna love it.
So yeah, we have a couple classes with waiting lists. I mean, I know you'll remember my last few years have been, I only have 4 people in my class. How do I teach a class that has almost nobody in it? And now I have the opposite problem, which is a fantastic problem to have. We have space issues, and yeah, most of my classes have 14 kids. So it's pretty amazing. We're struggling a little with staffing and not having enough early childhood. We need another early childhood teacher, and we probably need another para. So that makes it a little challenging. And I'm sure, just like last year, the class you heard from me about was ELL, because that was brand new for me and a challenge. The class this year that fills that category is an infant class where it's birth to 12 months, which feels like a very big range. And we had 24 babies. And I was originally signed up to have that by myself. We thankfully split it into 2 groups. So we have a long-term sub who's got the 5 to 12 month olds, and I've got the birth to 4 month olds. And so we each have 12 babies registered, but like the first week was last week, I only had 4, and this week I had 6. So it may be that it takes a little while for everyone to come. I'll be contacting families. I've been sending emails, but I may need to actually call and just be like, just checking in. So
Interesting. And welcome, Mary Kay.
Thank you.
What do you have to celebrate?
That I will not be the only pastor in this place on October 6th.
All right.
And until then, there's way too much work for 2 of us to be doing for 4 full-time program staff. So sorry, I was picking hymns for Sunday because the person who's supposed to do that hadn't done it. So
Ooh. That's interesting. Like I could have a whole side conversation with you about what goes into picking hymns for.
yes,
Wow.
it's all I can do not to just pick what I like.
Wow, interesting.
So yeah, fun days, but just a little too full.
And Kelly, what do you have to celebrate this week?
We start our program next week. So yeah, on a personal note, my son who did preschool last year and clung and cried and screamed and kicked every single drop off is going smoothly so far. So I will take it. He loves it. He was excited for it this year. So he just needed to fall into place, I guess. But so
Wonderful.
yeah, but nothing to celebrate with our program yet. We'll see what numbers are compared to who signed up. And I'm excited though. I'm excited.
Yeah. And they should celebrate because they have you. what do I have to sell? I'm celebrating finishing I'm not finished with my book, but I finished the last chapter to put the flesh and muscle on the skeleton, which is a good thing. And so now I can make the skeleton look even prettier and add some detail, but it's going well. But getting this last chapter in, it's about couples' use of technology. So I was writing about dating apps and about conflict. And most of the research, actually, not that you asked, but most of the research, it's unfortunate because so many people like go into doing research with a really negative view, right? So technology must be a bad thing for couple relationships. So that's what we're going to study. And, you know, for most couples, it's not a bad thing. Like it's like an efficiency thing, right? And, anyway, but about dating apps and couple communication, and then things like viewing porn and cybersex and sexting and cyber addictions. And there isn't something called TIPV, which is technology facilitated intimate partner violence, which is very, very interesting. When I was at the United Nations and I was talking about technology, we were talking about migration and migration and urbanization. That was it. I was talking about trafficking, actually. And as you can imagine, having access to the internet has just opened up more tools for things like trafficking and intimate partner violence. And I mean, even like the withholding of access to technology is a power move, right? And things like that. Anyway, but it's done. So I am celebrating that. So.
Well, did you come up with an answer for how to make your partner stop reading all their email or everything they find on Facebook aloud?
Yes, communication. So, yes, that's and in the whole category of couple communication about your partner's use of technology. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I live with 2 other extroverts, and we all tend to do our technology in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
And the one with the least good hearing is making the most noise.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the suggestion of earplugs. I mean, honestly, I mean, you know, sometimes there are just those things that we have to assert our agency and find a more comfortable place for us to
I'm
do our
writing it down, earplugs.
Yeah. Anyway. Good. So does anybody have anything you'd like to ask?
I have one really quick question. It should only take a couple seconds to answer. I have a couple parents who are really, really anxious. I had a dad who literally his legs were shaking the entire class time
Oh,
because he was concerned with how his son would eat snack. And I mean, the email I got from him, I have some concerns about snack. He eats 3 things. Will he be forced to eat? And I was like, no, he won't be forced to eat. And I won't be there. And how is that facilitated? And what if he cries? And will they come get me? And he's never been with other kids his age. And he's a COVID baby and COVID ruined him. COVID. And then when he introduced himself in class, he was stumbling over him. I mean, he is so high strung. And I have another mom who's super nervous. So I've just been saying things like, we had kids before COVID who wouldn't separate from their parents for weeks, you know, and we had kids before COVID, you know, who wouldn't, and we've had kids who sit at snack anyway. So I'm just trying to think of some, like, what are your kind of go-to phrases or things to say or ways to sort of just help them calm down. This is probably the most nervous parent I've ever had. And the way, you know what I mean? Like his knee was shaking the entire class. And all he was thinking about was his son. And his son, you know what? He did fine.
Yeah.
He's
So
fine.
Ellen, just to clarify, is his anxiety like ECFE attendance specific? Like when the child separates and all that, or is it more general to sort of parenting?
I'm not sure yet. This
Okay.
is the first time I've met him, but I think that with this particular nervousness was just, how is he going to do? I'm really worried about him. Is he crying? Does he miss me? And you know how all parents think their kids are the best. This is one of those dads where every single thing his son does is like over the top praise. We're kind of veering into the soft side of the developmental highway of overindulgence. So I think, yeah. So, and I've met him once, right? But he just seems so concerned that his son is messed up. And I just want to say, it's okay. But I don't, I want to meet him where he's at. I just don't know if anybody has any strategies for those super nervous Nellies.
I don't have any quick phrases, but I feel like I'm seeing, that might just be that I'm seeing more parents because I'm not used to having full classes, but I'm seeing more people who would be falling kind of into that category. And I think it's important for us to remember and maybe remind our parents that it's not just that they're COVID babies, they're also COVID parents. Like we focus on COVID babies, but it's like they've been isolated. They haven't had a chance to normalize behaviors and see that crying at separation is absolutely expected and typical,
Yep.
especially if they haven't done it before. But even like you said, in pre-COVID times, we dealt with separation all the time. This is a normal piece of development. And reassuring parents because they're COVID parents.
Yeah, I love that, Becca. You're right. Everything feels bigger and harder because we missed out on stuff too. Yeah.
They've
And
been isolated too.
I had my first really big birth to 5 night class last night. Haven't had one in a while. Adorable little 18-month-old named Jack. And he was throwing everything. He brought a big foam block about yay big by this into the middle of circle and was throwing it up in the air and throwing it up in the air. And it was bouncing and throwing it up in the air. And she was like, oh my God, stop. And I was like, he's good. It's a foam block. It's not hurting anything. She's like, oh, and then I have all my
parents haven't even had a chance to have their kid have a meltdown in the grocery store because now we do curbside pickup. Like it's not just that they haven't had UCFE, they haven't had exposure at all.
Yep. And then I had my papers. I had a lot of papers last night, and I usually put my papers in a latched box in the toddler room and he handed me everything. First, he handed me my iPad, and then he handed me a stack of forms, and then he handed me a paper, and he was picking them up and giving to me. And I was still talking. I was taking them. And she was like, oh, stop. She was trying to get him. I'm like, I've already done this today. Like I already had a toddler hand me all my papers. I said, if I didn't want them in my papers, I'd have my box, which I've had a toddler pick up my box and carry it away. That's why I have it in a latched box. But yeah, so just and she was just like, oh my God, he's so embarrassing. I'm like, oh my God, he's a toddler and it's okay. So yeah, you're COVID parenting too, post-COVID parents. I love that. That's what I needed. Thank you. Anybody, I'm happy to have anybody else's insight, but.
It's kind of like they don't have engagement with other kids. They're not in the shopping center. They're not in the grocery store. They're not in Sunday school or class. And the things that many of us find are normal, they have one baby.
In a vacuum. They've literally not seen any other kids.
I'm married to an only child, and when they first went to hand one of the boys to him in the nursery, he was terrified. And he's not an easily shakeable guy, but he was like, how do I hold him? What do I do? And he didn't transmit any of that to the people around him. And and the nurse just said, be sure that you hold his head up and it'll be fine, you won't drop him. It will be fine. But if you don't have any experience in this,
Yeah, and that's a good point too. I just keep forgetting that these parents, not only have they not had their kids with other kids, they haven't even seen other parents parent.
mhm,
They haven't been to the grocery store and been like, wow, at least my kid doesn't do that. So yeah, they're kind of seeing this for the very first time. Yeah,
mhm, mhm.
yeah. I mean, I know that so many of them are like, my child doesn't have any manners because he doesn't hang out with other kids. I'm like, they never have manners.
Yeah.
It's just not what they do.
That may be what's on TV, but this isn't what really happens. And even the awareness that like in a mom's group or a moms and dads group, we tend to talk in separated sentences, separated by the things we have to intervene with, and go right on talking without any hesitation, which is something we learn to do as parents of young children. But if it's your first time doing that, and you haven't hung around any other parents and kids, you probably don't know that. You think your kid is, horrifically interrupting. No, if I stop talking because we need to attend to something else and I pick right up where it was, that's okay.
Mhm.
That's how parents in parks talk all the time.
Kelly, I'm curious from your perspective, since you're probably the parent in the group with the youngest children. So if you were in a class, like, just what is your take from a parent perspective? And I know it's hard to kind of separate your professional brain, right, too. But let's say that you were sitting next to that dad and you were a parent in that class. Like, what would you say to that dad, sort of parent to parent?
Yeah, it is hard to separate, like you said, because I've delved so much into early childhood and everything. So I'm aware that it's normal. Yeah, if I was sitting next to that dad and they were like, oh my gosh, this is going wrong, kid's doing this or that, I would just be like, oh gosh, no, seriously, let me tell you about when Alex did this. Or, I would just try to be there with them, or tell a similar story and just try to, just like any other parent, really, you just try to let them know that, like you said, it's totally normal. And it's hard. I mean, even I had one of my kids pre-COVID. He's 5, so pre-COVID-ish. And it was first time parent. You do that anyway, without COVID on top of it. You're like, oh, my kid is what is he doing? And what are other parents thinking? And, all of that. So I definitely understand where he'd be coming from. And then on top of that, to have the stress and the feeling of COVID has ruined my child, So yeah, I would think what you're doing, Ellen, is great, just keeping and reassuring him that, this is how kids are pre, post, whatever COVID.
I know, I wish he was in another class.
Yeah.
My Thursday group, I don't know what it is about my Thursday group. It never quite meshes like the other groups. But nobody was really like, oh, don't worry, my kid was like that. Nobody really gave that. So I was doing it, but
Well,
usually you
maybe,
get somebody.
and he's new. This dad is new.
Brand new. Yep.
So, it'd be interesting, for us to check in with you on him. If I mean, it would almost seem like a strategy now is to help, like you said, meet him where he's at so that he feels comfortable enough that he comes back, right? That it's not such a feeling like freaking me out, I'm not coming back environment, but it was just like, okay, we got through that, I'm coming back. And then if he comes back a second time, he'll come back a third time, so that then, and then over time, just knowing you, right? And then especially getting to know the other parents in that group, even if they're not a super gelling group, right? Then like the temperature will come down hopefully a bit for him. Anyway, I was, just as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, well, he's in Ellen's class, first of all. So there's a huge plus for him. And then, it'd be to check in like in a few months, like maybe at the end of the fall, right? And just see, how is this guy doing now? Like, has he, because and part of the reason I mention that is, there are just anxious people. And so COVID or no COVID, right? So it could be too that this guy doesn't shift a whole lot and he's kind of hyper aware on everything. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
That thought really did occur to me as well, as someone who does struggle with anxiety, is this could just be how it's manifesting right now. But 2 lessons that I thought might be helpful if they are in your lineup at all are that I keep calling it the wrong thing, I think, but that 2 lists and a third that we've talked about before, because it really focuses on sharing what's hard. Hi, Kelly. sharing what's hard together, and why is that helpful? Like, why is that helpful to talk about this list of hard things together and focusing on the why and the process, not just the list.
Yep.
And so it could be like, oh, seeing I'm not in this alone. Other people are struggling too. So that felt like one lesson. And then another one would just be that co-regulation piece.
Oh yeah.
Because he's so high strung, like learning how to take those deep breaths for himself. He can help his child, and it wouldn't have to be targeted at all, right? This is something that's good for everybody, but it might be extra helpful for him.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing 2 lists and a third next week or week 3. So yeah, I love that one.
Another thing I thought of, Ellen, is that because when you were describing like his leg moving all the time, he might be someone who has something totally different, because one of my kids does that all the time and he's not particularly anxious. He does have ADHD, but he just moves all the time because it helps him. Yeah.
Well, and the only, when he was shaking his leg, I thought maybe he was just a mover. I'm usually like, I'm clicking a pen, or I move a lot. But he told the early childhood teacher that he was super nervous the entire time because he was so concerned the entire time that his son was missing him.
Gotcha.
He's like, I was so worried. I was so worried. Yeah. So anyway, thanks guys.
Yeah.
We can move on. I didn't want that to that took way longer, but you guys are awesome. I have fidgets. I have a bin of fidgets.
Yeah, I would imagine though, Ellen, like you're not alone in this, right? I mean, that there's going to be, like I have coffee with friends who are still, just so we're in this funky period of COVID, right? Where, it's like, is it gone? Is it not gone? Right. And then, like I was just even traveling, I would guess 1 out of 10 people are wearing masks, and somebody at the university was saying their understanding is that like classroom policy. So when I left in May, all the students had to be masked in the classroom, right? And now it's like student prerogative or an instructor prerogative. And so as an instructor, I can request that everybody is wearing a mask. Now, unfortunately, students don't have that kind of power. So it's just them, right? So if they choose to mask, they're masking, but they're still possibly sitting in a classroom with people anyway. And so, it still is kind of shifting depending on where you go. And you're right, this is like the first kind of, especially for parents with little kids, like if this is their first entry into society, right? So that's kind of freaky, so it's
I think is the best way of putting it. I think this is something we've never dealt with before. We've always had parents who were secluded for whatever reason. And they come to ECFE and you're like, oh my God, this child's literally been nowhere. But that would happen few and far between. Now it's happening all the time. And I think, yeah, it's just really an interesting way to think about it. It's like everyone's coming out of hibernation. Yeah, that's a really good point, Susan. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
COVID
but I'm
is
glad I am always, glad everybody brings everything up, but this is, I think it's a shared issue. It really, so
yeah.
thanks for raising that.
Who knew that the term
And it's-
COVID baby would be a thing?
right? But
Oh,
it's,
he's a
I was
COVID
just
baby.
gonna
Oh.
say, it's not just the babies though, it's the like
COVID
toddlers
toddlers.
and preschoolers too,
COVID kindergartners.
right? How many pivotal developmental milestones were
Mhm.
reached alone at home?
Yep.
Um,
Or not reached
or not reached,
at all. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
The speech
Yeah.
delays, the social emotional skills.
Yep. There's a
You know,
lot.
and this doesn't apply to ECFE quite as much, but what I'm also experiencing from like conversations I'm hearing, but thankfully not expected to be part of, is about people transitioning back to I was reading the other day, what the return to work rate is like 46% or something, right? And conversations I have with people about teaching, right? And so if you were teaching online during COVID, like, are you continuing to teach even though you can't teach in person? So there's all of these questions about what is better. Like even for our retreat, I was talking with that pastor who, like oversees their board or whatever. And he and I had a great conversation about, his daughter being in a Spanish immersion class or whatever, and it was fully online. And their tension around either she could do that online. And remember, this is like in the middle of nowhere. So she could either do that online or she could go to a face-to-face classroom, right? That was not Spanish immersion. So, and it ended up being, and so I think there's just a ton of questions still, almost this, sort of this carryover from COVID about sort of, it's like a new normal, and like, are we working at home? Are we working back in an office? Are we commuting? Are we not commuting? How have our expectations have shifted, right? And I think that is adding to some of the energy or the static that is in people's hearts as they're trying to settle, right? And so then, and as a parent, right, then you're also caring about your kid. So if you can't answer a lot of these questions in your adult life, now you're mapping that onto, can I answer these questions for my child? I can't. Oh my gosh, right? So the sense of security that you all provide to parents, I think is invaluable. I mean, that like number one thing with, and Becca, this, right? When people are anxious it'll be fine.
The base of the brainstem, right? Do you feel safe is the number one thing.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Susan, I have a question. When you talked about return to work, are you talking about physically returning to the office?
Yep.
Okay. So these are people who've been employed all along.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can contest to just like my baby's class this morning. So everyone there is pretty much on maternity leave still right now. And a number of them will be going back to work in the coming weeks and months. And at least half of them will be doing so at home. So it's this in between kind of thing where it's like I'm working from home. So yay, I get to see baby, but I can't take care of baby because I need to do my work. It's a whole new thing to navigate.
Mhm. I'm sorry I zipped out when you were talking about masking and all that kind of stuff at the beginning, but one of the things in our place, we kind of have an ethic that if there's somebody in the class who feels uncomfortable without people masking, we mask. The whole staff has masks, nearby. And especially because I've come back from COVID and I'm still coughing and sneezing. And, so it gives the impression that I'm still contagious, even though the CDC says ain't so. I actually had somebody who objected to my presiding at communion last Sunday because I was coughing and sneezing, because they knew I had COVID, actually, is why I think they objected. And I just said, then, at the next service, okay, we're going to do this differently. And I'm not going to touch anything but what I'm going to eat and drink. And we'll have other hands doing all the rest. And that doesn't mean those are all clean and healthy, but you do what you can to make people feel comfortable.
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
and even, because it's, like this, I think it does, again, it comes down to power, and it's kind of respecting individuals and recognizing, um, there's this on this meditation app that I have, like every day, there's a little quote, and the quote yesterday, I loved it. It was like from Mark Twain, and it said, if you're part of the majority, take time to reflect, you know? And so, it's just like, well, it's your prerogative to request that people do this, but it's also your prerogative as a teacher, as a pastor, right? Is to say, let's talk about what the community feels comfortable with. If one person doesn't feel comfortable and is masking,
Mhm.
and if they choose that we all do, like pull
Mhm.
out your masks.
Mhm.
So yeah, I totally agree. But I think that there's just so many people haven't established a policy for themselves, right? And so when you're in a forum, whether you're an administrator or you're a teacher or whatever it is, like I think that and you are seeking guidance. That's what I'm hearing from people, is that, remember when COVID started, like that time in that school district, or that school year, when was it, like March of 2020? Is
2020.
that it? Yeah.
Mhm.
Like when the shit hit the fan, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And they were looking to the administrators, and the administrators were like, we don't know what we're doing. So like they're all looking above. And so in a way, now here we are, what, like a year and a half later. Is it a year and a half, or is it 2 years? 2 year and a half? Oh, God. Who knows? Anyway, but we're, and I think that the return to teaching, the return to work, the return to masking, not masking, whatever, is a bit in a similar way, where it's like like people are trying to figure out, and they're looking to administrators, and it's kind of like, well, we're still figuring it out too. Anyway, so hi, Jenny. Good to see you.
I can't miss it even if I'm running late because I teach a class.
But do you have anything? We're at a perfect spot to pause. We're
Yeah.
done with what we were doing. So what do you got?
Oh, I have one reflection and one question. And my reflection is, I just feel like my brain is so alive from this. This was my first week of classes.
Mine too.
And it's like, I keep trying to, I'm like, keep literally wanting to pinch myself and going, I get to do this work. This is so amazing. And just have these moments of looking across an ECFE class, and most of them are really robust, and, at least 10 children or families, and just feeling so grateful for this.
Yay.
Yeah. And Roseville is so much more diverse than Hastings even remotely was. And so I have met families this week from just probably 10 to 12 different countries who
Yeah.
or their family of origin was from there. So feeling really grateful.
How
for
many
it.
classes are you doing, Jenny?
I attend like 12 or 13 things, and 9 of them are where there's a parent component that I
Okay.
prep for.
Okay.
And then there's a couple, there's a couple drop-in and plays, and then there's a couple that are non-separating, no parent discussion. And I'm just there to float and help.
Sure.
And
But like parents, so probably 8 or 9 that where you would like actually have to pre-plan and pre-plan.
8 or 9.
Pre-plan.
I think it's
and prepare.
9 that I have a lesson for.
That's a big load for your first year. So you're
It
rocking
is,
it.
yeah. And then they have a toy lending library that I staff partly as an outreach thing 3 hours a week. So I'm like, yeah, I have a lot less planning time than I had at Hastings. But I'm full time. So as I said to my husband, I'm going to be working more than 40 hours, but here.
Oh yeah.
it's
Especially your first year. But
Yeah.
also Becca and I were just talking about this as a side thing. Like you have to plan, you have to like on a Sunday afternoon, be like, I'm not thinking about work today. I'm not going to turn on my computer. I'm not going to check my email, and just really, really turn your brain off at least part of a day on the weekend. Really important.
for sure.
It's hard for me because I'm always like, I have some free time. I'm in a lesson plan, or I'm going to listen to a podcast, or I'm working I'm not working, but I'm working. And I just need to be able to just shut it down.
Right.
So
Yeah.
make sure you do that. That's good self-care.
Yeah. I
Some
will.
of us are better at that than others, the shutting it down part.
I'm gonna text Becca at noon on Sunday and be like, you're not working, are you?
Well, and that's just it. Half the time I could honestly say, no, I'm not working right now, but am I thinking about work?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
That's the part that's harder.
And I would encourage you guys to hold that thought about boundaries with your parents, because as our conversation about sort of a return to work and what that means, and all of these moms coming off of maternity leave and maybe working from home, but not really work, but then also their kids being there, or their kids maybe not being, whatever, right? Is that, the flexibility is in some way really good, because people will say, oh, I can like multitask and I can do all of these like career things and these family things. And it's all good because I can do it on my time, but then that concept of my time gets really messed up, so that I think increasingly we'll see parents like on the weekends that are doing work because they're feeling maybe guilty because they really weren't able to complete something during the weekdays. So without that physical boundary of space and time that traditionally we've had for going to a building, we commute. And so we, invisibly clock in, we invisibly clock out. Ellen, what you're talking about of asserting those boundaries on our time to say, today I am not doing this. Today I am a parent. Today I am with my family. Today over here, now I am working. I think for a lot of families it's just going to get harder and harder and harder, because they're going to demand or have these expectations that they work from home, but it's going to be really hard to realign those boundaries. Anyway, so the stuff that, like you're feeling for yourselves, I am really glad that you mentioned it, Becca, about these parents returning, like the pre-COVID or the COVID parents like returning from maternity leave, because I do think that's really going to be something they're going to need to talk about.
I love your talking about the pros and cons with the flexibility, what that does to us. I feel like way before COVID, the accessibility of technology has had a huge impact on people being able to really clock in and clock out, and how many people have struggled with that flexibility of being reachable at any time because they have their email in their pocket now versus not being in the office. So I feel like this has been an issue for a lot of families for a whole generation, but it's just like so many other things with COVID exploded into like way more now. Let's times 10 it, and it's everybody instead of a handful of people. Figuring out how to have those boundaries and flexibility at the same time.
Sorry, that got us way off. Jenny, you said you had a question too. I didn't, yeah.
I do. I was just curious if anyone had, so when I do parent share questions or group questions, it's kind of the getting to know you piece. It's been interesting that so many of not all, but many of the families don't necessarily bring their country of origin background up. Like they clearly have an accent. And so, and I know it takes, I want them to be able to bring their whole identities here, right? And so like one of the things I made sure to do is when we were making our name tents, is, saying, if you could put your children's names on there and anyone else who's in your family, grandparents, aunties, whatever, just to, embrace extended families. But I was just curious if you have ideas for helping families be able to really bring their whole identities. It's almost like, but I also don't want to put people on the spot, like I was overhearing two parents, and one who's white European background said to the other who was Asian background, "Oh, where are you from?"
Yeah.
And he said, "I'm from Roseville."
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you want to be careful that you don't have this bias happening about that kind of question either, right? So yeah, just thoughts on that.
I've got something, Jenny, that I did when I did a family literacy class, and I had most of my families were from South America, Central America, but I had some from Japan. And so what I did is I put a map on a bulletin board, and then I took pins and I made little, the little plastic Post-it flags. I made little flags. And then I had them stick their pin in their where other places they call home. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like where you're from, or, you, you're not, you don't talk like a white Minnesotan, so you must not be from here. So it removes that idea of, you're not from here, but also, and then obviously I didn't have any English speaking white families in that class. But I did have a mom in that class. She was from the United States, but her husband was from Japan. So she put Japan on there. And then she was from a little town in Iowa. So she stuck her pin in Iowa. It was other, like you call Northfield home, but where are some other places you call home? So I felt that was a really good way to be like, not asking flat out, where are you from? And then it was neat to see the pins on the bulletin board.
I love that phrase.
And did you-
think it's fantastic.
Do you have one map for all your classes? Or just
Oh, I don't do it anymore because now I'm in Northfield where everyone is very white. I just did this for my family literacy class, and the most families I had was 8. So I had 8 pins. There were 8 pins on the board. So
I was thinking it'd be kind of fun to do it where all your classes are using the same map.
oh, you could do Google Maps.
Or not
Yeah.
Google, but no, a physical map, but.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I did. Mine was physical.
My class in St. Paul had 2 different maps up in the parent room. One was a world map, and it was like, if you are from anywhere outside of Minnesota, but I still love the other places you call home, because you can be 2 things. You could put your pin, and so it was really amazing to see how many people are from so many different places. But I always put a pin in because I grew up in Massachusetts, right? So like that was relevant even as a white European background member of the class. So that was really fun. But there was also, I thought it was neat, a map of St. Paul pinned up next to it. And each class got a different color head on the push pin. So like I remember one year Thursday morning was little red ones, and a different class would be black or green or blue. And it showed every single street like in the district. And so you marked where your house was, because it might turn out there's an ECFE friend who lives 3 blocks away, but they're in the Monday class and you're in the Thursday class. And so then you could ask the parent educator for contact information or to share yours if the other person was interested. It was just a way of building community and connecting people.
Yeah.
So there are some fun map ways to
Yeah.
help share that. But to your original question, I often do this a little bit later into the school year because I have other things I want to get in right away, but you could do this at the beginning of the year. Talking about rituals and traditions and celebrations is a really fun way to bring in family heritage, and that can be true for anybody. So it's not going to single some people out as maybe. I think the most important thing, and I know you know this, Jenny, is to never make someone feel like you don't belong here, right? Because our message is the opposite. You belong here. Do you have a little kid? You belong here. This is your place, right? So we want to be really pushing the you belong here message, but also like we care about all of you. So yeah, sharing different traditions that your family grew up with or that you plan to have with your kids can be a way to help bring that cultural piece into.
Yeah. And especially I would want to divorce that from the December
Not
holidays.
Christmas, right? Not Christmas.
And actually it might be interesting to do that in November, because I've heard so many, like if you listen to the Splendid Table, so many people, so many immigrant cultures embrace Thanksgiving as an American holiday that they bring the most amazing foods to, like a curry, different curry traditions that come out of Thanksgiving. And but
And
that's
that's one you still also have to be careful of with, especially if you have any native populations in your class. That can be a really difficult one. What exactly are we celebrating? What are we thankful for in terms of colonialism?
yeah.
Which, but I mean, like one of my examples for cultural traditions, my husband is German and he didn't grow up doing this, but I found it is making Schultüts for the first day of school for my kids. Schultüt translates from German school cone. And apparently it's a tradition when children start kindergarten that they get this giant paper cone that the top is covered in tissue paper full of candy treats, school supplies, stuff like that. It's basically like an Easter basket or a Christmas stocking for the first day of school, right?
Oh.
And so we started that with my family when my oldest went to kindergarten. So it can be any time of year. I really feel like you could do the cultural traditions and rituals and what that means to you and your family. You could pick stuff out from any time of year to do that.
Right.
Mhm.
You know, the map one is interesting because I wonder if I was thinking about the St. Paul map. That you also want to be careful not to put families on the spot if they say live in a housing project, or do you know what I mean?
A shelter?
None of these were identifiable other than the color represented which class you were in.
Okay.
So there were not names, there were not like,
Ah,
nothing was identifiable at all. It would be like, I see that there's a pin like really close to my house. And then the next week when I go to ECFE, I ask my parent educator, can I give you my information for whoever
family.
lives this place?
Yeah.
And then she would also not know who belongs to, but she could say, you know, there's a red pin who lives close to, and I would maybe say which black pin was mine, you know, lives close to this. If you would like their contact information, I have it. So it was a little complicated, and as much as anything, it was just to see where people were throughout the city as well.
Yeah. I love it. The community.
Not
building
perfect,
aspect.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Helpful.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, guys, I gotta run. I have to get the dog to walk, and then I have to go pick up my daughter in a little bit. So it's great to see you all.
Yeah,
You all too.
yeah.
welcome back to
Joining us
school.
for whatever time that you can. Yeah. All right, everybody, have a great week.
Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye.